All right, Andy, I have Balaji here with me from Intel. Balaji, welcome.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here and join Ingram Micro.
All right, so Balaji, can you tell me a little bit about just well, what is your title and a little bit about your background?
Yeah, you guys caught me at a cool experience. Intel has sabbaticals, and my manager's on her sabbatical. So I'm the acting director for technical solutions sales, and we cover the two geos of the Americas and Europe, Middle East, Africa. And you might ask what that means, technical solution sales. AI requires assistance when companies are just starting their journey with AI. And so our TSSs are kind of the level 2 support from Intel to help make sure that they get the best experience of implementing AI on top of Intel. So that's what we do as a team.
Do you see any specific industries leveraging AI more than anyone else, or is it truly sort of democratized where it fits everywhere, right? Is it one type of customer or is it all customers?
Yeah, I think that question, I'll speak anecdotally towards it, Mike. I don't think I'm going to say that I've got data in my head on how it's applied in each vertical, but I think if you look at AI in a step back level of its business analytics, right, and business intelligence, it's actually become quite prevalent in almost every vertical that we are working in. So whether it's manufacturing or it's edge or smart city environment, and then back into the data centers for companies doing social media or companies doing gaming, anything that involves any kind of data available inside the enterprise or within the cloud, they're using AI. So from a vertical perspective, health and life sciences is finding value. We've all seen the indications of how you can have an AI that's been developed for vision, and it's able to tell on MRIs even earlier than the trained, schooled physician whether there's a potential cancer in that patient developing, right? That type of insight is becoming more and more valuable to almost every industry.
In the marketplace today, right, for our resellers and even at Ingram Micro ourselves, there's a lot of new folks, right? It's been sort of the great resignation kind of thing. So if you're trying to explain AI to somebody that might be new to the industry, how would you explain it to them?
Sure. I think it starts with the end of that last question that I gave, which is that AI is just one more tool in the hands of businesses to derive analytics from their data. And as we've been able to store more and more data, as memories become cheaper and cheaper to have within, all the different types of compute technology we have, or solutions, servers to workstations and stuff. AI is basically that analytics engine that we've developed. Now, if one were to lift a little bit under the covers of it, one would say that AI involves a whole process. Most everyone in the industry would say that AI starts with data. You have to have good data coming in because bad data results in bad models being deployed. So you need to have good data pre-processing and curation in order to get you to a point where you can do modeling, where you're training a model. You pick a vision model, or you pick a natural language or text or speech recognition model, and you train it. And once it's performing to your expectations, you deploy it and you infer results from it. And so AI is this ability to take the tremendous potential of machine learning, which has a lot of math underneath, but has been abstracted by all of the frameworks that are available in open source, and take those capabilities and use them to get insights that we couldn't get before. So it's a new level of insights that isn't possible with the traditional approaches to, statistical analysis or other types of methods to try to get business intelligence out of our data.
So really, maybe just is there anything, or is there any new feature, let's say from a Xeon perspective, that really has enabled AI or taken it to another level? Any recent new features that we should know about?
Sure. I think it's a great question, and a highlight is that we initially started to, when math became really important, we developed the ability to do vector math, and we built the AVX, Advanced Vector Instruction Pipeline, within Xeon, right? And that's been around for several generations. And then when we saw that AI workloads, we had talked about earlier, Mike, that 80% of the market for AI is inference, meaning going and putting those trained models out and then getting intelligence out of those models that you can make use of, right? Oh, that's a fish, or that car is going off the road. We need to turn it back onto the road. That type of intelligence. And so when we do that type of work, the features that we needed to deploy into Xeon became really obvious to us. One of them was that when you look at data model, deploy in terms of the AI process from front to the end, then when you do the deploy, it turns out that you might have done floating point 32 to do the training, and that's what everybody does in the industry, regardless of whether it's, Intel CPUs or if you might use GPUs from Intel. But when you get to the point where you've trained the model and deployed it for inference, you can actually do inference in much lower precision, which means less math, less compute cycles. And so on Xeon, we've actually added VNNI as of the Ice Lake generation, the Intel Xeon Scalable 8300 processor. And with VNNI, you can actually get much faster analytics because it's doing less math, basically. The precision is less, but the accuracy is still the same as what you would have gotten, nearly the same as what you would have gotten with FP32, floating point 32. So that was in Ice Lake that we added. With Sapphire Rapids to come, we will be making more details available on what we call AMX. You can Google this and see it on intel.com. It's Advanced Matrix Extensions. And now we're going to take a leap forward, not only in inference performance when the model's being deployed into the market to get analytics, but for training during the model portion. Typically, when you do heavy duty recurrent training and stuff, you might use some sort of accelerators to help you, but we're going to make it easier for the market to buy a server from Ingram Micro and to be able to deploy it and day one start doing pretty solid training on it and get that model ready and then deploy it. So that's a key new feature that we're adding to Xeon in the coming generation.
Yeah, I'm sorry, maybe I do. So another common thread from talking to people is really the idea of edge computing, right? And I think that's where we see these inference models.
Yeah.
I mean, does Intel have an outlook on the edge or distributed IT, whatever you want to call it? Have you seen any interesting things by a customer maybe that you'd want to share?
Nothing necessarily specific in public that comes to mind, unfortunately, on a specific use case. But I think from an inference perspective, we find that there's a lot of use cases that apply to engaging the end customer, right? 70% of US GDP is driven by consumers, right? And there's a lot of interaction between businesses to consumers, B2C, right? And in that B2C engagement, there's all kinds of ways. Of course, now people are starting to wonder, where's he going? Is like, we have to respect data privacy. We have to respect what kind of images we capture or other things to do an analytics. But there's nevertheless a potential with AI in a B2C environment like retail and other areas where you can really see advances in engaging that customer. So for instance, in food retail, generically, imagine that you have a favorite shop and you have a relationship with them, right? And I'm going to stay generic brand wise on purpose here. But imagine you have a relationship with them, you've given them approval to be able to know when you walk in the door, and they know what you like to order in the morning. And they're going to save you a couple of minutes because they've got your order ready because it's already there and ready for you. Pick it up, you've already paid, and you leave. And so that's a type of things that AI could potentially help with, is making just productivity, not just inside a business, valuable or better, but even improve the relationship with the consumer.
So one of the things that always comes up is there's a lot of different classifications of what is AI and what isn't. And we've touched on it with this idea that there's really kind of a couple of big pieces. One of them is the initial model. So I've collected a lot of data, and I've built something. Then I'm going to use that to create a model, and then I'm going to take that model once it's trained and put it out in the real world. Um,
Mm.
that model in the real world is most of what quote normal people see day to day as AI. And yeah, we could get into an argument about whether or not that is. Um,
It
but
is, yeah.
where a lot of my interest comes in is that we have different needs at those different levels. And so let's start on that model in use standpoint. So I'm going to roll out a model, and it's going to be used in, let's say, a manufacturing facility where I need rapid feedback. What would be some of the constraints I might need to think about? Everybody says, well, put everything in the cloud, but when we're talking about actual processes that are running on a line, things may, I need quicker responses. So, what would be some of the things that we would look for that would help in that kind of an application, where Intel, what would Intel recommend if we're looking in kind of that kind of a use case?
Sure. That's actually an interesting example, Andrew. I think the the choice in terms of whether one goes to a cloud instance or uses on-prem is an important one. And I think that when you give the case of a manufacturing environment, I would, hazard the guess that the IP and the data that exists in that manufacturing environment is quite important to that business, and it's information that they need to keep secure. And so one of the choices that some companies make is that they want to keep that AI development and that AI deployment on-prem, right? Of course, the inference or the model being deployed into that manufacturing environment is probably happening on some sort of edge servers or edge equipment throughout that manufacturing line, or maybe monitoring that warehouse or whatever that application is to do the type of AI analytics that they desire. But even more so, one might keep a local data farm and limit the amount of times that I go out to a cloud. So for instance, that's kind of like a hybrid approach. If we extend it further, I would probably, that customer might choose to keep an on-prem data center or an on-prem server farm that they do all of their work on. But when they need to do heavy duty training or retraining of their model because of the change in the data sets or whatever that they're bringing in, they might choose to burst to a cloud, and they need to do a secure method to do that because they want to protect that data set, right? That we talked about is important to their business. And in that sense, we have, federated learning is a term in the industry, and there's a way to manage data in a secure way when one is trying to manage movement of data and getting it to a place where you might do training on it, and then you finish the training, and now you get that model and data back and you deploy it into that manufacturing environment.
It's very enlightening. One of the things that, like I said, as we get to see more of this in kind of the day to day, about how AI actually works and how it's affecting things, we are seeing a lot of changes in the way people are deploying, the way they're doing things, and that there are other decisions to be made as well. So to your point, from a data governance standpoint, where do I want to keep data? Do I have response time requirements? So again, production line, if I need to make a decision, is this a good part or not? And I'm using, let's say, a vision tool to evaluate that, I need that response as quick as my line runs. Now, you
Yeah.
brought up an interesting point too, that, well, we need to do some ongoing training with these things as data changes, those sort of things. So, I may have started, and literally it's not quite like, go to the store and pick one up, but there are commercial models out there, and in fact, in many cases targeted for certain industries. But that would be kind of my starting point. And then I might do some initial training, deploy something, and then I'm going to make adjustments. Now, if when we're doing let's call it retraining, okay, I'm not doing my initial model building, and as you've said, for that initial model building, I may have some very specific requirements, but for that retraining, what are my concerns there? What are typically the important things in that retraining space? So I'm looking at taking my pre-built model and adapting it to my new data set that I'm seeing out in the real world.
Yeah, and we can talk about that, Andrew. I wanted to touch on one thing before that, though, is that we talked about how is AI democratized, meaning is it available to the masses of businesses out there? And I think most of the industry would say yes. With the right level of software expertise, almost anyone can deploy AI today, and that's built on the back of the open source community and specifically, like if you go to GitHub and you don't have to create a model. I think when we've talked about this, I think I heard a couple of times, I get the data, I create a model. Often you don't. If I need a vision model, I'll probably pull up a ResNet 50 and it's already trained to detect like 1,000 objects. And I've literally downloaded that specific model onto my PC. It took a lot of work to get the environment and everything there in the Jupyter notebooks, but I've thrown it pictures of my dog and it says golden retriever. So I didn't have to create the model. I could find something online. The same thing exists for chat bots, for natural language speech processing, everything else. There's a wealth of pre-trained models out there. BERT from Google is also available for speech. And so my point is that you don't have to create it as number one. And then retraining is kind of a regular exercise. Often you might pick up a model that's been trained already, but that you find that for your particular use case, it's not doing so well. And so like that manufacturing case, if we go back to it, Andrew, the maybe you're detecting objects that aren't the same similar size or dimensions or type as what you were detecting on that line at another time, right? The production line has changed. In that case, you might want to retrain the model to be able to show it that these are all the good products and this is what a bad product is. And then you train it enough and now it's been retrained and redeployed, right? And so you can do all that within your control, and it's a fairly methodical process. I think it's a repeatable process that all can employ.
So around those models, one of the interesting things that I've come across is that a lot of times getting the right model for the use case is half the battle. So, and from the standpoint of one of the things we always talk about with AI is the idea of bias, but sometimes that isn't necessarily the data set or the model has inherent bias, but I expect that the problem is going to be looked at a certain way, and I make a choice about a model along that way. Anywhere where I'm going with that story is actually just somebody has found a new model for the healthcare that actually came out of a model that was built for baked goods. And when you look at the cellular structure of like a dough, it's very similar. And in this case, the model was built with the idea of looking at a larger sample, so a lot of cells at one time, and looking at consistency in those cells because that's important in baking. And somebody realized, oh, wait a minute. Well, if we're looking at a mass of cells and we're trained to look at differences within that, well, heck, we've got a new way to look at things. So I think that's some of the real exciting things is that we're getting into these kind of being driven to look at things in different ways because, for lack of a better term, somebody never thought of it yet.
Yeah, And I think, Andrew, it's a beautiful case. I hadn't heard of this one, to be honest. And that's a great part about I love about this job and AI in general is that it's a constant learning, and it's a evolving space in terms of potential applicability. And yeah, it's a fact. I think that we're learning from each other with AI deployments. Is that there's the general categories of what you do with AI, and those are that you do vision processing, right? You're getting imagery in, and you feed those pixels to the model, and you're trying to get something out of it in terms of what the pixels represent or object detection, or there's myriads of use cases, right? Whether it's cancer like that. And then you have the other spectrum is you're bringing in speech related things and language related things, and you're trying to perform some function or get some information out of it using that. But those are such huge broad categories, and you describe one between the doe versus the cellular, of getting some sort of cross value from one use case to the other. I think we're all learning on the fly that there's tremendous applications ahead of us for AI. Indeed, it's when I hear some of these things, like some of our pundits talking about AI being dangerous and stuff, I just put it to either they're talking about decades in the future when compute power could possibly match a human brain, like a lot of us here having this conversation. That's way off. Versus they're worried about some sort of bias or implementation problem in the model, like you were referring to, Andrew, where we didn't do a good enough job, and then we've got a driverless system that's got a potential hazard in it because it's going to run into a problem, right? So those are the things we do need to be tempered and careful about, is when we deploy into mission critical environments.
So let's talk a little bit about this from a hardware approach. One of the things that over the years we see with Intel is kind of a very interesting place in technology, in that a lot of what they do is driven by the market, and a lot of what they do drives the market. So kind of bringing it back to the AI question, do we see more from the Intel side, more generalization, where Intel is going to look at adding technologies that enhance benefits in AI spaces across products? Or are we going to see more specialized, where, well, if I want to be doing AI stuff, I want to be working on a subset of products, or that sort of thing? So are we going to kind of go more general, where we're going to have a lot of products, Intel is going to have a lot of products in the market that will benefit the space? Or are we looking like very targeted, specialized technologies?
It's a really interesting question, but I can't let go of the fact that you gave a little bit of kudos to Intel, and coming from Ingram as one of our partners and distributors, it's great to hear that we're doing a good job, right, of influencing the market and providing solutions. So having said that, I don't know if it's predictable from a long-term perspective. I think, as you mentioned, we tend to put features into the market that we think are valuable to the marketplace. And so we do have an ability, based on being in the x86 ecosystem for 54 years, that we kind of know where trends are going, and we're monitoring and keeping our ear to the rail, so to speak, right? And then there's the other aspect of, being careful to put out things that are going to do well, for you guys to sell through to the market for us, for instance, right? And so I think you'll see continued insertion of more capabilities, AI and other workloads, of course, related into our processors, both Xeon and Intel Core. And I think you'll see also innovative things like the Movidius, USB stick that we created on our vision processing unit, that are come to realization more and more, because that VPU, the Movidius VPU, it became really useful for digital signage where you wanted to do some level of engagement of, again, the consumer through whatever you're putting on that signage and maybe changing what's on the signage based on who's walking by, that type of stuff. So I think we'll continue to put in other products, especially I will admit that we are working on GPUs. We've talked about our executives actually, like Raja Koduri, have talked about the Intel Xe architecture, which builds on our 12 plus years of client graphics efforts that we've done that's under the Intel Arc brand. Well, that same architecture is now coming out in data center GPU products this year and next year. And so we'll be adding AI capabilities and AI support for those GPUs as well. I think there's going to be a balance of lots of new features in the same products and some new products coming out to meet market demand.
Well, it sounds like a good way to approach it because, like I said, I mean, we're not the state where we're at now is still, you know, I need some different things. Whether I'm at the beginning, whether I'm actually one of the few people out there, maybe trying to build a new data set, trying to build a new base to that retraining, to that implementation. So it sounds like Intel's working good to have all their bases covered.
Yeah, and thank you. I think that the other part too, as you were mentioning that, is that we are looking at how to make AI more consumable for a broader number of people. So all of us in the tech industry are familiar with kind of, validating and putting in a container, to use the word container from our virtualization area, put in a container, a solution, and then to make that available to our, to your customers, to Ingram's customers, and make it easier for them to start up, right? They didn't have to figure out what the recipe was to start up on AI. Based on understanding them and their needs from a few questions, we could potentially say, hey, here's a small, here's a medium, here's a large, right? And so that's something we're looking at, is to try to see if that type of, solutions-based approach offer could be, valuable to get people started faster with AI. So stay tuned for more.
It's great to see the accessibility of AI and how Intel's taking us there. Balaji, we appreciate your time. Thanks for joining us at our event here. I think you said a lot of insightful things for Andrew and I, for sure. Thanks for coming.
Thanks a lot. You guys are a great partner of ours, and I appreciate the time to chat with you today about our AI activities.